Welcome back to Comic Watchers for our 11th amazing episode. Comic Watchers is brought to you by Comic Watch. Comic Watch is your source for all your comics and media news and reviews written by fans for fans. Don't forget to subscribe and follow us on Facebook and Twitter. Spread the word that we're coming for the clickbait sites. It's our time now. I'm your host, Cody, coming to you from Oahu, and here's the rest of the crew, starting with our birthday boy who just turned dirty 30 today.
Hey guys, it's me, John Jack. You know me from Comic Watch or my group for the love of comic books. You can look me up on Twitter at John Batusi Jack. Don't forget to subscribe and click on the bell to enable notifications so that you can see more of our videos if you like what you see.
Hey, I'm Derbs from Salt Lake.
Hello, I'm Brian from Arizona. JJ, welcome to the Dirty 30. If an ailment hasn't hit you yet, don't worry, one will be assigned to you quickly.
Awesome. Yeah, we've got B is with us almost out of spite because he's the only other person besides myself that hasn't missed a show yet. He is sick, and we do wish him speedy return to wellness. And a big happy birthday to JJ. So B, before the NyQuil hits you,
Yeah.
Do you have any news for us?
I have some stuff. So Batwoman has her first official trailer at our website, comic-watch.com. There's a little spoiler for Elseworld in there. Venom continues to be a hit, even though it has different mixed reviews. And it's actually still making progress in worldwide box office numbers. For example, it has now officially taken over their origin of Spider-Man. I did read a site that said that it is the highest grossing origin story comic book of all time. We'll see how well it does. It's supposed to be released at sometime in mid-December on DVD. Batman and the Outsiders are supposed to, a lot of sites are saying, a lot of clickbait sites are saying that it is canceled. However, it's actually just delayed. It's an unknown time. There's been a lot of different reasons why. We'll just wait and see. It does seem a little odd because there was so much media put in, or so much advertisement, even in the solicits in this week's comic book. So it does seem a little odd, but we'll see where it goes. Image and Dead Rabbit are in some hot stew. They are actually being sued by a bar called Dead Rabbit, who also published a comic book on their menu. So unfortunately, after 2 issues, it has been canceled, which makes me sad. I really liked it. I loved where it was going. So boo-hoo.
Not only canceled, it's been recalled.
Yeah.
They have called back all issues that have been sent out to shops, which is insane. That's like some serious, that's beyond cease and desist. That's any copies that are out there should be destroyed.
So,
which is crazy.
So the cease and desist letter came out in October, and they still released it in November. So I'm wondering if that's repercussions for it. I don't know. I feel like this story isn't going to go away. Keep tuned for that. But that's all I have for the news today.
And hang on to your copies of those comics, kids.
Yeah.
I think the last time I
remember
a big actual recall like that was that infamous Wolverine slur issue, where Sabretooth uses an anti-Semitic slur in the middle of it, and the editorial completely missed it. It went out, and then they had to recall it and edit it
People
and send
don't
it
like
back
that?
out. Yeah,
No,
apparently
that's awful.
That is a no-no.
Whoa.
That's not okay.
When was this?
This would have been probably, I want to say 2002, 2003 or so. Remind me after the show. I'll send you the screenshots of it. I actually have the unrecalled, or the recalled version.
Nice.
So.
Wolverine don't tolerate no racial slurs, bub.
None, bub. None. Was there any other big news from this week? I think that pretty much covers everything.
I wanted to talk New Age of Heroes for a minute, if that's okay.
Okay, yeah, go for it. Cool.
So sorry, I'm putting Wolverine back. I got distracted. As of last week's solicits, I believe it was last week, it's been revealed that Sideways and Curse of Brimstone are being canceled, which brings us to 3 remaining New Age of Heroes series, which are Damage, Silencer, and the Terrifics. Silencer definitely feels like it's moving towards a organic end as potentially damaged. It's interesting that this imprint that began less than a year ago is already starting to wind down. I don't think it's a surprise to anybody. As one person put it in my group, it certainly isn't unexpected. The unexpected being a short-lived Steve Orlando-led series that has also been canceled. Um, so, the New Age of Heroes was touted as being an artist-driven imprint, and which immediately, if you look up, I wrote an article back in May titled "Is the New Age of Heroes Pulling a Bait and Switch?" because it was driven as an artist-driven imprint that almost immediately switched all of its artists. Jim Lee was solicited to write an issue of Immortal Men. Or to draw an issue of Immortal Men. He drew less than half of one issue of Immortal Men. Tony S. Daniel was on Damage, and he drew 2 issues of Damage. Likewise, John Romita Jr., love him or hate him, was on Silencer for 3 issues. He actually stuck around the longest out of anyone. I will say Kenneth Rocafort is back on Sideways as of now, but I don't know how long that's lasting. He was the one who launched Sideways with Dan Didio. So it's silly. I've read most of these series from the start, and I'm honestly going to be sad to see Silencer. I keep mixing those up. Silencer and Damage go. I haven't been much of a fan of Terrifics, but it's going to happen. It's going to happen any day now. Well, in 3 weeks now, since Solicits come out in 3 weeks. I highly anticipate that these books are going to be canceled soon. Back to Spotlight, I believe.
Oh wait,
Yeah, sure.
Wait, hold on. I do want to say that it was Wolverine 131, and it was November 1998.
Well, I was in the ballpark at least.
Yeah.
Did you have questions this week, Arby?
No, I think we're doing that other thing that we're doing.
Oh, okay.
That other thing.
Right.
Build the anticipation. No, yeah. I mean, before we move on from the New Age of Superheroes, like I think that everything you said makes really good points. That whole shift away from the artists. I mean, it reminds me a little bit of very early Image, where these were all kind of artist-driven titles that the artists swiftly moved away from. Like, how many issues of Wildcats did Jim Lee do?
Arby says 3.
That's exactly right.
It is interesting that up to this point, the artists are still being billed above the writers, and I believe they said, I heard someone quote saying they were doing it by the Marvel method, which to them means the issue would be drawn and then the writer would write the dialogue, but the issue was the art and the plot direction were driven by the artists, which could explain why some of the series have somewhat divergent feels to them, since some of them are on their 3rd or 4th artist within 12 issues.
Right. No, I think it's an interesting experiment, and I'm certainly glad they did it. I think Silencer could be a really interesting character for a really long time. Maybe Damage. I can't see Damage being written by anybody other than Venditti. But
God, last issue of Damage was amazingly good, I gotta say. It was funny, it was well drawn, it was really intelligently written, I felt. It was a great issue. Just wanted to throw it in there.
Yeah, absolutely. Derbs, did you have something to say?
Yeah, just really quick. If you've been living under a rock and you play the Batman Arkham games, the Arkham Collection has been released for PlayStation 4 and Xbox One, except this is only Rocksteady's trilogy. So you're getting the remakes that they came out, or not the remakes, but the remasters that came out in 2016, and you're getting Arkham Knight, but you're not getting Arkham Origins that was made by Warner Brothers Montreal, and they're charging.
So if I already own those, sorry, go ahead.
They're charging $60. $60 for all 3. and no Origins. It's all the DLC, but damn. Anyway, I just wanted to complain.
If I already own all three, is there any point in getting that? If I own the Return to Arkham and the Arkham Knight and all DLC for all of them?
Not if you have Return to Arkham. I don't see why you'd want to.
That's what I thought. Okay.
Yeah.
That was my only question.
So if anybody's been paying attention, they could have bought all of them for pennies instead of 60. But anyway, that's it.
Fair enough. I don't. Yeah, I was gonna ask, like, is 60 good or bad? I haven't bought a new video game in, I don't know, like
60
two
is pretty high
decades.
for three
That's
games, the oldest of which is like 11 years old.
Yeah. I mean, that's full price for a new game, and you've been able to buy the remasters of 2 of those games for anywhere between 10 to 30, depending on when you look.
I think cover price for the remaster.
What was that?
I think cover price for the remasters was 40, like on release.
Right, on release. Yeah, and
because I got it when it came out.
If you're watching prices, you could pick up Arkham Knight for like 10 every now and again. So whatever.
Yeah, when it goes on sale on GOG or whatever.
Yeah,
or on Steam.
So Jim Lee was actually on more issues than I thought. He made it past 12. I was looking at Comixology, but they only had the first 12 issues.
Okay. All right. Yeah. I mean, but it was short-lived. It was shorter-lived than I would have expected, or honestly would have liked. And I mean, I did really like I liked the original Wildcats run. You know, that first 50 issues. You know, Alan Moore had that really nice run in there in the middle, and you know, a couple of good issues from Eric Larson in there. But it was just one of those things. Like Jim Lee's name was on it for God knows how long. Like almost like you know, a Stan Lee joint in the 80s, where it's like, oh, but what did you do on this one?
You know what? Okay, this is funny. Just real quick, since you mentioned that. So someone gave me X-Men #1 from 1991. First words in the book from 1991. Stan Lee presents. Stan Lee hadn't touched a comic book in 25 years by that point.
Yeah, it's really interesting how that kind of plays out.
It was just funny.
So, speaking of things that are funny, Tom King, new Batman issue this week. Batman number 59, brought to you by Tom King, writing Mikhail Janin on the art, right? Somebody correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that's correct. It's the second issue of the Tyrant Wing story arc, which seems to be centered on an almost inside look at the psychology of Penguin and how the new structure in Gotham operates, with Bane basically running everything from inside Arkham, allegedly, according to Oswald Cobblepot. There's something going on here that's, you know, a standard Tom King joint where nothing is quite what it seems. But I will kick it to one of the guys that really liked the issue to kind of talk us through what happened and why it's important.
Actually, I'd rather JJ go so I can defend whatever he says. I can rebuttal.
Okay, that's fair. JJ, you want to talk us through what happened in this issue?
Oh God, what happened in this issue is really the question. So I was a little behind on Batman. I dropped it in issue 53, as I've mentioned before in the show. So I recently read the last 6 issues. So I might mix a thing that happened last issue with the thing that happened this issue. But so we have Penguin knuckling under to Bane on his throne of skulls that he had shipped to him or something, apparently. Or he killed like 400 people before in Arkham. But so Penguin gets thrown in Arkham, knuckles under to Bane, doesn't do the task properly. Bane kills Penguin's wife, which causes Penguin to reveal to Batman that Bane is the one running things out of Arkham, whereas Batman has been thinking since I Am Bane, which wrapped up in Batman issue number 19, that Bane is catatonic in Arkham Asylum when, according to Penguin, he's anything but. So after a tense standoff, which wasn't tense at all because of some terribly stilted dialogue by Tom King at the gates of Arkham with some security guards, where Batman uses the words bat boot. That's a thing that Batman would say out loud, I suppose. He gets to Bane's cell and proceeds to beat the holy hell out of Bane, while Bane talks like he's 7 years old for like 5 pages. Commissioner Gordon then intervenes. Why Commissioner Gordon is hanging out at Arkham Asylum with Bane and not running the Gotham police force, I don't know. But Commissioner Gordon is personally at Arkham Asylum and tries to stop Batman, at which point Batman punches Commissioner Gordon in the face. And Bane this entire time is still putting on his I'm 7 years old act. One thing, if you've ever read a comic starring Bane when he was younger, is Bane murdered a man with a teddy bear when he was 6 years old. So this is not 7-year-old Bane. But he's talking about, no, I'm drowning, mommy, because Bane was in the Chuck Dixon written series, I believe it was Chuck Dixon, in the 90s, that explained Bane's origin. Bane was put in a cell in Santa Prisca that would fill with seawater every night, and he would have to tread water until the cell emptied in the morning when the tide went out. And that was why, or that was a big facet of his childhood, is he had to do that from about age 8 till age 18, which explains his insane physique even without Venom. So Commissioner Gordon, after a big fight, manages to talk Batman away from Bane, and as Bane is being rolled away on a gurney, he drops the act for just a split second, and he smirks. Bane has in fact been running Arkham, to the surprise of literally no one, as we've been told all along that he is running Arkham. He's running everything. But, you know, pretty much the least twisty twist ever is pretty much what I've been saying. Like, shock! The man we've been told is pulling the strings is in fact pulling the strings! Oh my goodness, we should all be surprised!
To that note, Comic Watch the reviewer we have on Batman, Dr. Bethany Pope, pointed to that moment as kind of like a glaring crack in the wall. Like, if you didn't have that last panel and King had left you with the doubt, like maybe Bane isn't behind everything, it would have made for a way better story. That last panel broke what was actually a halfway decent issue up to that point. And the issue before it I thought was great. The poem embedded in Penguin's loss of his wife. Like, I thought that was really well done. Like, kudos to Tom King for doing something that I looked at and said, wow, this is great. And then that last moment with that smirk, and it was just like, oh, damn it. Why'd you do that? You had me. I was sold again. Like, for the first time since I Am Gotham, I was in. So.
I Am Suicide was all right.
It was all right, and I thought the Bane arc the first Bane arc was pretty good. Anytime Psycho Pirate shows up, I'm interested. I'm gonna buy it. I'm gonna read it.
Yeah, I liked I Am Bane all the way up. So, where King lost me was I Am Bane, the finale, which was issue number 20, which was a full-length issue fight scene. Followed by the first issue of The Button, which was also a full issue fight scene. And there was a 5th week in there, which meant we went 7 weeks without any kind of meaningful dialogue from Batman. And that just upset me a lot. And then I didn't care for The Button. I didn't like the War of Jokes and Riddles. I didn't like Rules of Engagement. I did like Super Friends. I didn't like the Poison Ivy arc. And I didn't like The Wedding or Cold Days. and that's why I dropped Batman.
Fair enough. Well, let's hear from the guys that are still digging it. Particularly Brian. I know that King's Run is kind of for you the definitive run on Batman for you and for your experience, which we will fix eventually. But for now, this is something that's near and dear to you, and I get that. And I don't mean to totally just crap all over it. Like, I tried to find the good in there. It's just, for me, this is a low point.
I have a long list for you, Arby. I will give it to you at some point.
Okay. Well, I appreciate you for at least attempting to read it and like it. But we missed a big part of it during this story. When we find out that Bane orchestrated Nightwing's shooting, right? And then on top of that, what he says is probably the most powerful thing when he gave him the boot. He was like, "How dare you take my boy out?" Like, since there's always been that kind of distance, it's nice seeing Batman actually opening up and you see him wounded. And I thought that was really powerful. So Tom King, I love you. I don't care what they say. You're amazing. You're everything for my Batman that I need. So it's cool. It's cool.
You're his first, his last, his everything.
Yeah.
Oh God, that turned.
Yeah. I didn't know how to go with that. I panicked.
That's a good point. Yeah, like he did make that reveal that, it was kind of already in the wind. I feel like once Bane enters the picture, obviously Bane is the one pulling the strings, puppet mastering, especially after that sequence in Batman 50, where we see that he has orchestrated the wedding that wasn't, the DC wedding that wasn't. Same day, right? I think that was the same day release, Batman's non-wedding and...
No, it was like a week behind or something.
Maybe, but it was so close. Like, oh my God.
I think it was like the next week, exactly, because we're like, well, is this one going to even happen? Because we already had it in our mind that
Gold 30 came out a week earlier because I think Marvel was trying to jump the gun on DC, or trying to beat DC to the punch with the disappointing wedding.
Was it earlier?
It was a week before, yeah.
Mm.
Okay. Well, anyway, Derbs. Love to hear what you have to think.
I have a weird thing that happens when I read Batman because I've read so much. And it's when I'm reading, I always have this overlay of everybody's different versions of Batman up to this point. Particularly, Loeb and just kind of everything since, I don't know, the 80s. Like 90s forward. Late 80s, 90s forward. And so when I read King's Batman, it's just kind of like I'm reading a version of Batman, a story of it. And I just don't look at it like it's canon. And I know it is. I know I'm literally reading canon, but at the same time, I just have these different versions overlaid, and I'm very aware that I'm reading King's version of Batman. And, and so I'm always reading it in context, and I'm just looking at it for the story and just kind of, I see Tom King as a fan like me. Like he's a Batman fan, and it really comes through in his dialogue, in the way he wants to present Batman. He's a Batman fan. His Batman and whatever drives his Batman fandom may not exactly drive what I feel Batman is, and gel with exactly what I would define as what my Batman is. But every now and again, that stuff comes through where he's daring the cops to shoot him. He loses his temper for Dick's sake. I do like those moments, but again, it doesn't stand very well on its own for me. I've been that's what I've been reading, is I've been reading, Rebirth, Batman, King's Run. And again, I've been reading it in context and enjoying myself. I don't feel it's genre defining. Not quite, but I do find myself entertained. So it kind of almost reminds me. He reminds me a lot of Jason Aaron. Just he's good at dialogue, and he's good at kind of hitting certain notes. But I always find myself after it's over going, all right, where does this exactly fit in? Did what I just read, is that actually good or not? I have to think about it. Anyway, yeah. So there you are, for better or for worse.
No, I mean, I think you hit on a couple of things that are really crucial there. I don't know that I would go so far as to say that King is a Batman fan. There's a lot of instances where I feel like he's read enough to be dangerous. Like, remembered this one thing, but remembered a little bit wrong. I think JJ brought it up a couple weeks ago, or maybe a month ago, or God, we've been going for a while. But he mentioned the Dick Jason, or the Dick Grayson Jason Todd mix up with the chum comment and the stinky uniforms. How that was a thing that happened in a panel.
Let me define. When I say a Batman fan like me, I literally mean that. I'm not an encyclopedia. I haven't read everything. I'm not. If you had me write Batman, everyone would hate me. I mean, I get it. I understand. When I say he's a Batman fan like me,
I see.
He's a fan, but he's a dabbler.
I would love you if you wrote Batman. Just because you're derbs and I love you.
But I guess that's the only thing I wanted to say about that.
No, I mean, solid. No, I mean, that makes a lot more sense to me, because it feels like when you read somebody like Grant Morrison write Batman, and I mean, love it or hate it, but Grant Morrison writes Batman like he is inside Bruce Wayne's skin.
Yeah.
Like he knows everything that is going on in 80 years of Bat history, and he brings that to the table. I felt like Scott Snyder kind of did the same thing, but also kind of adding to. So, like a respect for the past, but an eye towards the future. And then with King, I feel like it's all about King. It's all about his interpretation of Batman, and that's great. I have no problem with that, but I have a problem with it when it becomes part of canon. When you're doing things that contradict previous canon, and I know with Rebirth, like, what is previous canon? Thanks post Flashpoint, but
52.
I prefer post Flashpoint. Just my personal druthers. But yeah, like, I mean, I don't know. Like, I don't think that he's a bad writer. I just don't think he's a good writer. I think he's a writer who has a shtick, which is to hit you with emotional dialogue, construct attachment, and then remove said attachment. We're excited that Bruce is finally going to get married. He builds it up for several issues, lots of pithy dialogue and double dates, and then he pulls the rug out. And I think that that's kind of, and we're seeing that in Heroes in Crisis, and we're seeing that with Rick Grayson. We're seeing that in a number of different ways across the DCU, and it's like, your fingerprints are everywhere, and I don't know how this plays in the long term. In the short term, you're going to gain some fans, but in the long term, I don't know how it'll work out.
I can acknowledge that maybe Tom King is a Batman fan in that he's read like the big stories like Nightfall and maybe No Man's Land, maybe Death in the Family, maybe Hush. But I don't feel like, yeah, exactly. I don't feel like he understands the voice of Batman in between as dictated by smaller stories like Gothic or Shaman or, or even stories that aren't Batman that feature Batman prominently, like Night in Bloodhaven, which is, I consider, essential Nightwing reading. I felt like his voice for Nightwing was really off as well. Robin had an amazing series written by Chuck Dixon starting in the mid 90s. And as much as Tom King might have read some essential reading prior to writing Batman, I don't think he has all his facts straight, and I don't think he has the voices down for a lot of the peripheral characters. And I honestly, I think he inserts his own voice for the main characters in all of the series that he writes. He doesn't write series about Batman or about Kyle Rayner or about, Scott Free. He writes series about himself, and that bothers me greatly when it's about a character that I care about. Which is unfortunate because I care about most of those characters. Maybe less Kyle Rayner, but he's writing like almost autobiographically about his own personal thoughts, I might think, which does make me worry because he talks an awful lot about suicide, and maybe we should reach out to him. I've
It's
mentioned
okay,
that
Tom
before.
King. I love you. Snyder, we love you.
I like Snyder.
Yeah.
But I've mentioned that before. Do we need to reach out to Tom King and ask him if he needs like a hug? Because there's been multiple times that he's mentioned suicide, and I feel like a lot of his writing is autobiographical. And as much as I might dislike some of the stuff he writes, I do think he's a decent writer, and I don't want anybody to be hurt or feel bad in any way. So.
Right, yeah. I mean, and that's a good point. Like, we are not about toxic fandom. Like, we absolutely don't want anybody to hear our distaste and feel bad about it. We just want to be able to voice ourselves as people that have been with this character for some of us 30 years or so. And our likes and our dislikes. Like, I think we come at things pretty even keeled.
And
Real
sometimes it's like a puzzle. It's just something in front of me that I'm looking at, and I want to discuss it. I want to figure it out. I want to, I just want to know what's going on, and that's why I want to engage in it. That's why I want to talk about it. And anyway.
Yeah, that's fine. Well, our Bezo has mentioned before regarding Titans. Why do you watch it if you hate it? And part of the reason that series like Batman, I continued with Batman about 20, I'd say 33 issues I bought after I decided that I wasn't liking the series anymore. That's not self punishment. What that is reading a book and hoping it'll turn around and that you'll love it. I'm not liking Titans much in a lot of ways, but I still watch every episode, and that's not out of spite or anger. That's because I would like to be happy with Titans. I'm not watching it because I'm angry at the series, or I'm not going into it trying to be angry at it. But, I read the last 6 issues of Batman, hoping I've been wrong about Batman all along. And that's not the case.
Oh, yeah, absolutely, totally. You mentioned Gothic and Shaman. Gothic by Mike Mignola, Shaman by Grant Morrison. Am I right?
Gothic was by Grant Morrison. Shaman. Oh, goodness.
Yeah, if you happen to have those are out of the Legends of the Dark Knight series that ran from like 92 to like somewhere around like 2008. I think it was like 192 issues. You want to find some really great creator-driven Batman stories. Check out Legends of the Dark Knight. It was a really fantastic series. Boy, Shaman was somebody, Mike Grell maybe? I don't know. JJ will find it, but
it's literally right here. I just saw it.
So a quick aside though, that before we move on to our next segment, I did want to kind of think, how much research do you guys think a writer should have to do into a character before they take them on?
Well, I personally like to read everything that character's ever appeared in. Which, for Superman, I wanted to know more about pre-crisis Superman, so I read 520 issues of Action Comics.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I think you're kind of on the same page as me on this, where it's like, if you're going to write something with a long and storied history, you should put in the time, you should do the research, you should know, kind of where you're going with that. And I was wondering what the Bryans think of that.
Well, with all the characters, from Batman on to like, just something relatively new, like maybe Damian. If I'm writing for Damian, I need to know everything about every Robin that's come before him. I mean, I don't see how, I don't know, it's just me, professional writers, I don't know. But I don't see how you could be given something that's been built by other people and not honor that by understanding it as wholly and completely as possible. I just don't understand that type of thinking. I mean, I do understand it, and but I don't agree with it.
No, yeah, absolutely. Like, God forbid somebody were to actually say, here you go, Cody White, you write Batman. And I've read probably thousands of issues of Batman at this point in my life. And still, there would be so much more that I would feel like, oh my God, I have to slam through another 3,000 issues before I'm prepared to do this. What about you, B? Like, you're kind of one of the I don't want to say like less well read, like that's not right, but I mean like less kind of widespread read.
Yeah, I mean, like I definitely had my issues or my certain people that I read. I didn't read everybody like I do now. I think it's impossible for somebody to catch up, like as a writer, to catch up on every single thing that they've done. I don't think it's possible. I think that as long as you have a good idea, that you.
It isn't though. There are a finite number of comic books in the universe.
Okay.
Say you need to read 900 issues of Batman to understand Batman. Read 900 goddamn issues. It takes about 2.5 months. I've done it before.
Right, but they also have, I mean, as a professional writer, which, I mean, clearly, so you wouldn't be able, I mean, if you've given like 2 weeks to start writing it, you're not going to have time. Like, you don't realize that they have deadlines, that they have all this other stuff that they have to put into perspective. I mean, just because they may have had it, I don't know.
I mean, and that's a good point. Like, there's only finite time, 24 hours, 24 usable hours in a day, as Miss Tyler's character in Empire Records points out, right? Only 24 usable hours in a day. How much time can you devote to catching up? But I feel like it's not often that these people get, a major book dropped in their lap. Like, it wasn't likely a 2-week notice. Tom King, when Rebirth hits, Batman is yours. And, I mean, like, for lesser characters, maybe a shorter amount of time. I'm sure, like Brian Hill probably didn't have a whole long time to prepare for Batman and the Outsiders compared to what Grant Morrison had with Action Comics when New 52 launched. But
well, Brian Hill pitched the Outsiders as far back as last May because he wrote an arc prior, leading up to it starting in mid-July.
Right.
I feel like Batman, if you're going to write Batman, you should read Batman #1 through The Dark Knight Returns. It's about 50 years worth of stories. If you want to write Damian, as Derb said, you got his first appearance, Batman 656, midway through or early on in Morrison's run. Read all of Morrison's run, read all of Morrison's Batman and Robin run, read Batman Incorporated, and also want to read this recent Nightwing arc that prominently featured Damian. And I feel like that is where writers tend to falter at this point, is not so much at understanding that these characters have appeared before, but that these characters have appeared recently. Nothing annoys me more than a character being badly hurt in one book, such as Batman is in Justice League right now, and running around fine in 3 other books, like he is in Batman the Outsiders, which isn't coming out now, Detective, and Batman. There's 4 different stories that are all canon, one of which he is crippled. Likewise, you could point at like Hawkeye in his solo series by Matt Fraction being injured and at the same time being up and running in the Avengers. You can point at any number of X-Men series that have crossed, and a character will be hurt, or even in some series, and I'm not talking about X-Men specifically anymore, but some series characters will die. And then they'll come back 10 or 15 issues later in a different series. And is that intentional? Or is that Brian Michael Bendis not checking his facts before he puts a random cameo in a series that he's writing?
Right, and I mean, like that to me is a little bit part of the loss of Jeff Johns as the COO, right? Like Johns was kind of policing all of that for the entirety of the mainstream DCU canon, and now that he's moved on from that position and into kind of some other avenues, like we're starting to see the after effects of that. So if anybody at DC leadership is watching, I got you. I will take that position. I would gladly police all of your stuff.
And somebody must have given us $1.
No. My God.
And this is where the show ends.
You beat me to it.
It's beautiful.
Oh.
You broke Cody.
Oh, you broke me. Oh, God. Yeah. So, does anybody have any final thoughts on Batman 59?
No.
Tyrant Wing number 2.
No, but if Arbizo's right and they don't give writers enough time to research before they have to write, that's on the publisher, not on the writer.
Right.
I still love you, King, no matter what. Keep writing the way you do. I love it. Screw what these people say.
All right, so moving on, we thought we'd do something a little different this week, and we've gotten some pretty good response out of the segments, the 3 question segments, and favorite Stan Lee issue, things like that. People seem to, for whatever reason, like to get to know us. So I thought that this week we could tackle one comic that has been important to you in your life, something that has been read by you, consumed by you, and has become a part of your DNA. So on that note,
so real quick, I totally misread what you wrote. So I had something completely different planned. So somebody else can go.
No, please, give us what you have. Like, I mean, even if it's just something that you loved, like, even if you don't realize yet how that's become a part of your DNA, it very well might have. So go for it. Do you, man.
All right. Actually, I can pretty much answer it because I remember. I think it was Uncanny Annual number 13. It was. I mean, I don't know how I received it. The whole story is it's probably my first comic book ever, but I just remember reading it over and over and over because that was probably my first comic book. And it's not so much the book that it was great. It wasn't anything like that. It was more that I saw it on TV, which is weird or I didn't see the comic book on TV. I saw the TV show and then I fell into the comics after watching the Pizza Hut Stan Lee stuff. Or it wasn't even DVD, it was VHS. And I remember getting, and that was at least in the 90s, and this book came out in 1989. And I remember seeing it in like the grocery store, and I wasn't sure I didn't have any money. I was like, 8? And I remember my mom didn't have any money, like none of us had money at the time. But she ended up dying, or stealing it. Sorry, I read the side. She didn't end up dying from it. she ended up stealing it from me because we didn't have anything. So for that, it's always been really special comic book. Because after that, like, I didn't get a comic book for like years. But my first comic book was a stolen badass annual that I don't even know. I don't know how it in 1989 in the 90s came into the shop, or into the grocery store, but it did. Thanks, Mom, for being a thief for me.
That is fantastic. Like, I absolutely love that. There used to be a thing where, like, grocery stores would have, random comics, like, back stock from other places. Or, like, they'd have these, like, back stock packaged up 2 or 3 packs.
Yeah.
And I used to just adore those for years and years and years. Like, I'd lived in a town without a comic shop. So when I was working through, like, Onslaught, the X-Men Onslaught series, it was easy to find X-Men, Uncanny X-Men, maybe X-Factor if you were real lucky. But if you were looking for, like, Cable and those tie-ins, like, you were so grateful that somebody was piling up all the issues they didn't sell and packaging them up and throw them in your drugstore.
Yeah.
Because that was the only way to get my hands on them without, getting my parents to drive me 2 hours to the nearest comic shop.
Interesting to note, in the same section that Walmart is doing those 100-page giants right now, they're also doing 4-issue bundles of random arcs and stuff like that. I'm not a big Walmart fan or patron, but it was kind of neat. When I went, they had, I think, Harley and Flash, which I think it was the Black Ice arc from Flash, which, granted, I don't think that was a hot ticket item. I didn't see what arc of Harley it was, but along with the 100-page giants arc, Walmart is now selling 3 or 4-page bundles. You can also get them at Half Price Books, and I believe Ollie's does them too with 5 bundle books. The little book bundles are not dead, is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah,
Cool.
I grew up in grade school in the late 80s, right? So a lot of my early comics, because they were kind of expensive for my family, and I was much more like, buy me a He-Man guy instead of get me a comic. Screw that. But I would get like cheap comics. They'd be like 99 cents in the store. But the price tag on them would be like, they were usually really cheap, is what I'm trying to say. And but I just had random stuff. I'd have a Fantastic Four here, a Flash there, a Spider-Man here, nothing cohesive. But I remember just reading them and just being like, whoa, this is amazing stuff. Yeah, I remember those. I remember those days.
I used to live right next to a Walgreens back in probably the 90s, and they had racks where they would sell comic books, and that's how I actually have my whole collection of Age of Apocalypse.
I got myself into trouble with my parents right in the middle of Age of Apocalypse. And my parents' best punishment that they could come up with was, you're grounded from buying comics.
Huh?
So I was like black market dealing in the cafeteria. Like, all right, I will give you this money. You go buy me this comic. I will sneak it into the house, like inside of my textbooks. Like, yeah, absolutely. Like, spinner racks were my life, God, until I left the house, really. Like, until I was 19 years old, spinner racks were where I was at. Oh, we're all muted. We can't all be muted. Derbs, hit me with a comic that is important to you and has become a part of your DNA.
Okay, well, everybody's probably tired of this, but
Never tired of that.
I mean, this is my original copy. It's all crinkly, and the pages are all yellow, and I'm worried that it's starting to fall apart. But I think I may have told the story. Was it last week that I talked about The Dark Knight?
Yeah, it was.
With my cousins and everything. So I just want to talk about the comic itself. Like, So I grew up in a very insular Mormon household, and I mean, very much, very. Let me put it this way: the only reason I was able to watch like Married with Children and The Simpsons was because my mom would go to my grandparents' house, which was just down the road, and so I'd watch the shows I'd get to watch and make sure they were turned off if when I heard her unlocking the door, because I'd lock the doors so I could hear her unlock them so I could turn the TV off. Anyway, so when I was, I don't know, 13, 14, and I'm reading this, it had very much that same kind of feeling. Just I'm reading something kind of forbidden and exciting, and it was a Batman that was unlike anything I had ever even considered. I mean, I this was before the animated series. It was around the same time that the first movie came out, so there was kind of that dark. The most access I had at that point was that movie. So when I was reading that, I realized it was in the future, and I realized something. I got thrown into it, and it was like being thrown into a hurricane, and I kind of had to go back and read it and just kind of figure out where I was. And it took me a couple days to get through it the first time. And then I read it again, and I read it again, and I read it again. And I pretty much, earlier when I was saying my Batman, everybody kind of has their Batman. My Batman started with Frank Miller's Dark Knight. And I think, that's the reference point for for Batman for me, period. It's not the only thing, obviously, but it is the core of it for me. I really like that Bruce is broken. I like that the Batman to Bruce is this thing inside of him, that it is who he is. It blew me away. It still does every time I read it. I watched the animated movies that came out recently, and really love them. Miss out a lot on the inner dialogue. There's a lot that you miss out on by watching those shows, but they captured the spirit of it completely. Yeah. So that's my definitive comic. I would probably say the same thing for X-Men with Fatal Attractions, to be honest. It's kind of the same thing for me with the X-Men. Different, but
right. Like I still need to watch the animated Dark Knight Returns. It's one of those things, like, it's so almost sacred. Like,
oh, dude, do it.
If you're
It's
a
so
Christian,
good.
if you're a Christian, are you going to watch an animated Death and Return of Christ? Like,
My wife's a Christian. She certainly does.
well, I don't even know how to respond to that.
he
But
bathes in hot water.
but it's that same kind of feel. Like, this is a sacred text. This is something that if you haven't read it, Brian, RB is here.
RB.
If you haven't read
I
it,
got a shredded copy. I'll send you, RB.
it is absolutely must read. We're gonna do an internal Comic Watch Secret Santa amongst a handful of us that have rogered up and said, we wanted to do a Secret Santa with each other. I hope that I get B, because I know what you're getting, and you're gonna get it anyway.
Well, I've already sent Brian The Dark Knight Strikes Again. That's on the way.
Nice.
Well, you got to read Returns first.
That's a really, he has to read that first. But it's a sequel, but it's an acid trip. It's the weirdest.
It is some insane nonsense.
So let me say about the animated show really quick, Cody. Really quick. I felt the same way. I felt like I'd been reading the Bible at home, and watching the show was like, all right, I'm stepping outside of my house and going to church.
Right.
And I wonder what church is like. And that I was really worried, but I had to because it was The Dark Knight Returns. I wasn't disappointed at all.
Thank God if the pastor didn't deliver.
Yep.
No, yeah, no, I
How many
totally
people
feel
did
you.
you just turn off because we all sound like religious nuts? I would like to go on record and say I am not.
Me neither.
Yeah, like
I don't think any of the four of us are, but I think that that we have an understanding. Like, I would never try to rewrite the Bible. I would never try to rewrite the Quran or the Torah.
I mean,
Like there is there is that kind of notion that we understand as sacred. Don't fuck with. And Dark Knight Returns for me is in that category of like, you just, why? Like, don't do it. Don't do it. So I'm glad to hear that they did it and they did it respectfully. Maybe this is the equivalent of Mel Gibson's Passion of the Christ or something along those lines. Maybe Charlie Heston's Ten Commandments. I don't know, but however it plays out, like that.
I don't
that
know what
is
you're talking about right now, Cody. It's just a good movie. Peter Weller sold it, and I love that man. I love Peter Weller.
fair enough. So, JJ, are you ready for your book? I'm actually excited to hear about your book because it's one that I did not read, but it's by someone that I love.
You've never read Batman Venom?
I have not.
Oh my goodness, you need to.
I haven't either.
Actually have not read a whole ton of Venom. I own a whole ton of like Venom miniseries, but I mean that's
Oh
that's a
no!
story
This
for another
is
day.
this is Tales from the Dark Knight issues. I believe 6 through 11 is the second Tales from the Dark Knight arc or third.
I thought you were talking about a Batman Venom crossover. No, okay. Yes, I have read Batman Venom.
Okay,
go
good.
on.
I was shocked. I was like, my God, you've never read Batman. Okay, so an arc that is near and dear to me is Batman Venom, which retroactively was considered to be a prequel to Nightfall, in that it is Batman's introduction to the drug Venom, not the villain Venom. I can definitely see how the confusion would lie, especially as it's written by Danny O'Neill with art by Jose Garcia Lopez, both of which did work in some capacity with Venom at some point or other. It's super funny. Sorry. So, Batman Venom is a story of. It starts out in the first issue with Batman. He's in a tunnel filled with water, filling slowly with water, and there's a 600-pound rock in front of him, and he is physically, even peak human condition, is not capable of moving 600 pounds. 600. It's actually 643 pounds. But so Batman becomes obsessed with his human limitations and how to transcend them. And a businessman leaps on this weakness and offers him a drug which can make him stronger. This is an allegory for potentially the steroids epidemic of baseball in the 90s. But basically, Batman feels so inadequate being human that he isn't capable of saving this girl. There's a girl behind the rocks. He needs to move 643 pounds to save this girl. The girl drowns. He can't move it. This isn't a story of Batman triumphing over evil. This is a story of Batman needing to accept his human limitations and he can't. So he becomes addicted to Venom. He becomes addicted to a drug to make him more. Does he achieve more? Yes. Does he lose who he is in the process? Yes. This is not a story about Batman winning. This is a story about Batman accepting that he is only human. Does Batman accept that by the end? Yes. That's the end.
Yeah, I have read it, JJ. When you started to describe it, I was like, oh, curse my stupid dabbler self, because I don't know what shit's called or who wrote what, but I've read that, and yeah, that was an incredible read.
Yeah, I'm the same. Like, I guess because you're reviewing Venom for the site, like in my head, you were attached to Venom, and I feel dumb for that. Like I'm better than that, but yeah, no, I mean, and Denny O'Neil, who is about to be honored at the Jimmy Carter Library with some kind of like lifetime achievement award, and rightfully so, for social justice, for social awareness in comics. One of the all-time greats as far as looking at the world that he exists in and writing stories inside that world. And I feel like, Dark Knight, Legends of the Dark Knight launched somewhere around 1989, 1990, I believe.
It's like 88, 89.
Yeah.
Started with Shaman, or maybe there was one before it.
There was one before it. The one before it was
Was it
the cover.
Gothic? It was probably Gothic.
No, it was there was an arc before that. I really can. Like, I can see the cover in my head.
Venom was like first 2 or 3 arcs of Legend
Right,
of the Dark
yeah,
Knight,
it was
though.
very early. It was very early.
Was it Going
and I mean,
Sane? Might have been Going Sane.
yeah, I think it was. I think that's right.
Yeah.
I think that's right. But anyway, like, in general, like, this is one of those brilliant things that I feel like a lot of writers on Batman kind of miss out on. Like, who is the Mask? Is it Bruce Wayne or is it Batman? Like, I'm the goddamn Batman can do anything. But Bruce Wayne...
This is a story for Tom King to read for a humanized Batman.
Right, exactly. Like, Batman is only capable of what Batman can do. And yeah, like, just a brilliant story. I'm glad you brought it up. I'm glad that we have cleared it up, because when you first said it, I was like, what can I say to deter him from doing another intercompany crappy crossover? But now that I understand what you're talking about, and remember that story from, God, I think the last time I read that I was 13 years old, still looking for doors with locks on them. Like, I mean, yeah.
Well, a couple of years ago, I read every post-crisis Batman story.
Right, right.
And Venom was arguably the best one.
Yeah.
I read
No
I read
doubt.
3,500 comics, and Venom was probably the best arc. Best team arc was probably the Tornado's Path, which is a Meltzer story.
Yeah.
You muted yourself.
Tornado's Path was really good.
Tornado's Path makes me cry every fucking time I read it. God, what a great story. Venom doesn't make me cry, but damn if it isn't just probably one of the best Batman stories ever written. Top 10.
Yeah, absolutely.
And nobody talks about it. It's a very, very underrated story.
There's a lot of those. We talk throughout the week for our viewers at home. The four of us are in a constant conversation, along with Nick Osborne, who is another writer of ours from Texas. We'll probably have him on sometime soon. Hey, Nick. Steve Batley out in England, and Ross Hutchinson out in South Africa. Like, the seven of us have a constant dialogue going on about, what we're reading, what's going on, what's going on in our lives, et cetera, et cetera. And these kind of things come up all the time. Like, why doesn't anybody talk about this arc? So I mean, this is us reaching out internally to you, our audience.
Go read Venom, Batman Venom. Go read it. I'll get the issues numbers to you, and also you, Arby.
Someday.
This is primo Batman. like
He's
this
not
is
wrong.
the stuff that should be of legend, but it
No.
isn't. There's also an incredible. I want to say it's a one-off story shortly after Jason Todd dies, where Bruce knocks over a fire escape trying to take someone down and ends up inadvertently killing a kid. This is again.
Yeah, Jim Aparo era, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
This is just there are stories that you need to read to understand Batman, and to me, this is one of them. Any story where you don't need Batman punching bad guys. You get that every issue. You don't need Batman triumphing over evil. You get that every issue. You need Batman understanding that he's human. You need Batman triumphing over himself, which, as much as Tom King may be trying to humanize Batman, I feel like I'm beating a dead horse here.
You are, but I mean, I get it. Like, I totally get it. Like, there are some things that
he's pushing humans so closely, but at the same time, he is writing, as I said earlier, he's writing a story about himself. He's not writing a story about Batman and what it means to be Batman. Like the story where Batman knocks a fire escape over, apprehending a bad guy. He's stopping like a mugger, and he knocks a fire escape down and kills a poor kid skateboarding, and it destroys him.
Mm-hmm.
Like hardcore friggin' destroys him, like suicidal depression out of nowhere. It's not, Batman is wrapped up in himself, and he's upset because he killed his son. He's upset because he didn't get married. He's upset because Mr. Freeze did this or did that. He's upset because KGB shot Dick. He's upset. He's mad because Poison Ivy, whatever. He's mad at himself for not accomplishing what he meant to accomplish. He's only human, and he understands that. It's not that his son got shot while he was standing on a rooftop 4 feet away. That's out of your control. That's cursing the weather. You can't do anything about the weather. And, these are Batman making human mistakes and suffering human consequences. And that's why it's interesting. It's not Batman dealing with things outside his control and being sad about it.
And this is very much when I hear you talking like this, I'm hearing, this is Batman. This is your Batman. This is who Batman is to you. And I feel like if the powers that be, I always feel an agenda behind writing that doesn't go in this direction because it's very macro. This is what we're talking about, kind of the macro versus the micro. You're talking about the micro type stories, but when you start to go macro in literature and you start going macro with like bringing Batman out into the Justice League and you start stuffing all these personalities in, it's really difficult and almost impossible to go micro. And so, yeah, I love the intimate stories. I could read a whole story just about the trials of Batman stumbling through a sewer because he's got a really nasty cut. He's got a really I could read something like that. I think there was one of the short stories in Batman Gotham Knight, the animated short story. I think it came
anthology.
Anthology, yeah,
that came out. The first one, I believe.
Well, it came out with when The Dark Knight came out on DVD, Blu-ray.
Are you talking about the first story where he had a technology that would deflect bullets, but it resulted in other people being hurt?
that was like the third story. This is the one where he fights Croc, I think. It doesn't... Anyway, yeah. So, I totally get it. It just... it's unrealistic to expect that every Batman story is going to focus on the micro. That every Batman run's going to reflect your ideal Batman. It's just, you want there to be some continuity, and you want there to be enough in there that he's recognizable.
I can acknowledge that.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
So when you're staring at Tom King's Batman going, I don't recognize Batman here, and I've read every single Batman comic ever written, that's a problem.
Right.
Well, that's about where I'm at.
I know.
No, yeah, absolutely.
I'm describing your plight.
Yeah, we get that. Like, and I'm in the same boat where I look at Tom King's Batman and I say, this doesn't fit with anything I've read in 30 years of reading, but like spanning all the way back to the Golden Age. Like, nothing about this feels quite right to me. If Tom King had created a character that's somewhat of a Batman analog that was, chatty like Spider-Man in a fight, and that was the character we were reading, I would probably feel very differently about his series than I do with Bruce/Batman in the title role.
Well, I think that's part of the issue with Tom King, as I mentioned last show I was on, which was 2 weeks ago. It's especially evident, I feel like, in Heroes in Crisis with Booster Gold. But in that, Tom King is interesting to people when he is writing a character you're not familiar with. Booster Gold, a lot of people aren't familiar with, so his Booster Gold is passable. To me, his Booster Gold is offensive.
Yeah, absolutely.
I've read a decent amount of Booster Gold, and the Booster Gold he writes is offensively out of character. You'll notice this in small things like Alfred hanging from a trapeze wire cleaning a T-Rex tooth in Detective. That's the kind of crap Alfred would be like, you get up there and clean that. You got a grappling hook. I don't. That's not something Alfred would assume the role of subservient manservant and do. That's something Alfred would ask Dick to do. He'd say, you know what? You're nimble. Get your ass up there. That's not Alfred. That's some jerk on a trapeze cleaning.
Yep.
And it might have been a cute moment, but Alfred in 80 years of comics has never once climbed a trapeze. Like, it's so ridiculous to me. And there's little things like that. You don't have your snarky Alfred hanging out back at base when Batman's out on patrol. You don't have, but it's peripheral characters like, Nightwing was approximately as snarky as Deadpool in the 2 issues he was in. Nightwing didn't sound like Nightwing. Nightwing sounded like Spider-Man after drinking 20 cups of coffee. Like, even, any character that shows up in Tom King's book gets Tom Kingified. Harley is her craziest self. Poison Ivy is her craziest, weirdest self. Poison Ivy's not talking about saving the environment at all. What she's talking about is her own mental health.
Right. Yeah, no, absolutely. Absolutely. Like, there is, it is what it is.
We had a Mr. Freeze arc that didn't have a single line of dialogue for Mr. Freeze in it.
Right. So we're running a little bit long. I want to quick hit my pick, which was X-Men, God Loves, Man Kills. It was one of the earliest graphic novels, if you will. Brent Eric Anderson on art. For me, this book was one that really hit home. I'm sorry about the ambient noise. I have my 4-year-old here. I have my 25-pound cat here. They're all doing everything they can to disrupt me. I grew up in rural northern central Florida where difference was not celebrated. It was punished. So, we had Klansmen around. We had, police that were obviously biased. We had some issues with race relations, with queerness, with anything that was different. And, I came to X-Men a little bit after, well after this came out. But the first time I stumbled across it, reading the rhetoric, reading the ways that Stryker approached difference was so familiar. Sounded like a church I could have gone to. Sounded like somebody at school. Sounded like somebody on the street. So seeing kind of that understanding about a lack of understanding really resonated with me as a child. I was maybe 12, 13 the first time I read God Loves, Man Kills. And there was something about it that felt just really, really right to me. You see Nightcrawler standing up to him. He is obviously like the most different, the most difficult to human pass or white pass or what have you. However the situation may play itself out, straight pass, whatever. He is like the perfect avatar for otherness. And I always kind of considered myself a little bit other. I know, and that's not fair of me. Like, I am a white, cisgendered dude living in the United States. But there is always that kind of self-identification that feels just a little bit not quite right. And seeing the X-Men stand up to this rhetoric really did shape a big part of my life. And, I tried to explain that to Chris Claremont at a con out here in Hawaii last year and broke down crying right in front of him. Like, stupid, whatever. There I am blubbering in front of him. I did manage to get him to sign the title page. So we got there eventually. But I mean, this comic really was the first time where I felt like, no, I'm not fucking weird. This is the way it should be. This should be the normal. And somewhere out there, maybe this is the normal, just not here. And, honestly, this was a big part of me joining the Army. This was a big part of me getting out of Florida. So, this is a comic that will always be something that hits close to home for me.
Yeah, that's the first book I read after I kind of stopped collecting, and all the timeline switching stuff with the X-Men kind of fell off for me. I just kind of went away from collecting for a while. So kind of X-Men comics, the X-Men animated series, that was all a big, wild, crazy blur in high school. And then I'm hanging out with some friends and I'm 19, and my buddy hands me one of these. He had 2 of them on hand, and he's like, "I've got 3 of these. You want these?" And I read it there. Very short book. But when I read that, I was like, "Oh, that's what this is all about." I mean, how did I not read this before I watched the show and read all the other stuff? How did I not read this? And I realized, wow, I'm probably missing a lot more than that. But still, it was a very, very amazing, defining moment. I really love it.
As you guys know, I've mentioned previously, I've been reading Claremont's X-Men for the first time, and I did recently catch. I think it was right around issue 128. Don't quote me on that, but Kurt refusing to use his image inducer anymore to hide who he was, which resonates really closely with what you were just saying about not hiding who you were. I grew up a punker kid in a small town, so obviously obviously, um, but you know, I'm not necessarily different in the sense that is recognized, but I understand what it means to be targeted and what it means to be looked at different. Um, but it was interesting to see a character who is visibly different at a glance choosing to refuse to hide. And that definitely makes sense with what you were just saying. Oh,
Yeah.
by the way,
I mean,
I found Shaman. It was the bottom of the stack the phone was sitting on.
oh, nice.
But it was Dark Knight issues 1 through 5.
Okay. And that was Denny.
And it's Denny O'Neil and Mike Hannigan, I believe.
Okay. All right.
Sorry.
I knew somebody very high profile. Cool. So that mystery is solved. But yeah, like, I mean, I was the same kind of category. You know, punk kid, the wrong time period, the wrong neighborhood. So I mean, like, I totally get that. And you have, you know, the added issue of the added whatever. Words are escaping me. But being, you know, part Native American, you know, we've got Brian who is Mexican. Like there are people who will look at you for what you are and hate you for. Brian was quick to remind me, like, also queer. So I mean, like there are so many things that are innate to you that people will hate because they don't understand it, because it's not theirs, because it's other. And for me, like, God Loves Man Kills is the ultimate text for fighting back. Like, it's the blueprint. You know, this is Jay-Z in comic form. This is the blueprint for how to deconstruct hateful rhetoric. And that, to me, is, I mean, just priceless. I mean, that is the best thing of all the great things that Chris Claremont did for us as comic fans, as people. That is the best thing he ever did for us. Somebody else talk, because I'm getting in the feels.
I agree with everything Cody's saying. Good job, Claremont. That's all I have. Apparently that's not all my dog has. Derbs?
Yeah. The X-Men, I see a lot of arguments back and forth. I mean, we all do, right? Like, Comicsgate really kind of threw a wrench into all of this that we're talking about, which I just found, and I still find hugely offensive. I have a very difficult time engaging with anything about it, just I get so damn mad. And
honestly, just on Comic-Gate, fuck Comic-Gate.
Yeah, right.
Like, I'm sick enough to where, like, my what is it? Your filter doesn't work. Just fuck Comic-Gate.
Yeah, I'm not wanting to talk about it in depth. But yeah, I mean, I was bullied into I was bullied almost to suicide for all my until I was in high school and got popular, relatively popular anyway. you know, reading X-Men and seeing people going through really tough times. I remember the first time. I have some cousins that are half Costa Rican, and I remember one of my cousins that's just my age telling me that he used to get into fights because of it. That was the first time I'd ever even considered he was different. I mean, as my first introduction to racism, period, was him telling me that. And you know, it's those kind of seminal moments that just really kind of stick with. I had to ask myself, how am I going to survive this? You know, and when I could read about people who were really strong, you know, fictionally strong, but still fragile. And I knew there were stories, and I knew it wasn't real, but I knew that real people were writing them. Real people were writing this stuff. And that's what I was connecting to. And I was pretty aware of this when I was in junior high school. I mean, I wasn't lost in fantasy. Reality was too harsh for any kind of bullshit nonsense. That's also why The Dark Knight really stuck with me, because just that concrete jungle thing, I really understood that. That's all I got.
I will say that's why Spider-Man always resonated with me. Is Spider-Man's a broke, crabby loner, and he's just like me. He's like 2 paychecks away from poverty. He's 2 paychecks away from being homeless, and he has no friends. Spider-Man's just like me. That's why I love Spider-Man.
Oh, totally solid. Like, I hope that you guys have enjoyed this opportunity to get a little bit of a glimpse into who we are as reviewers, as critics, but as humans above all. Like, comics work and comics persist because they speak to a certain part of society that is open and willing and ready to accept those narratives.
Fuck Bill Maher too, by the way, as long as we're telling people to fuck off.
Yeah, well, yes. Fuck Bill Maher.
Wait, are we starting a list? Just hold on. No, I'm just kidding.
Let me go get mine. 1 sec.
Yeah.
Fuck Tom King.
Yeah.
No. Get him together with that.
I'm just going with you guys.
So, as we move into Future Watch, tomorrow is Wednesday, new comic book day, and it's a hell of a comic book day. I apologize for last week in the fact that I got almost every issue wrong. There were some delays, there were some hiccups along the way, but next week we see Heroes in Crisis #3. We see Dead Man Logan #1. We see the Justice League Aquaman Drowned Earth finale. New Amazing Comics. New Return of Wolverine. New Uncanny X-Men. Of course, it's weekly right now, so sure. Like, it should be a really strong week for comics.
So Batman Damned isn't until Batman Damned isn't out until like the 12th, right?
Right. Yeah. Damned was delayed until the 12th. Doomsday Clock was delayed until the 5th.
So those were my picks. But, oh well.
I'm getting Action 1005, Amazing Spider-Man #10, Coda #7, which I'm actually really excited about. Coda. Detective Comics #993, Fantastic Four #4, and Marvel 2-in-1 #12. Decent week. I'm kind of bummed that 2-in-1 is ending, especially in favor of Fantastic Four. Although I'm a little happy that Pacelli's off Fantastic Four, as I'm interested to. I'm curious why there are so many delays on Fantastic Four, because on the one hand it could have been Pacelli related, which could be why she was canned, but at the same time Iron Man has been receiving multiple delays as well, and that is also written by Dan Slott. So it could be either of them.
Yeah,
But it's weird because we got an issue as Spider-Man last week, or Fantastic Four last week, or was it the week before? I've been working really hard.
Last week.
But
yep.
Yeah. So we got back-to-back issues of a monthly series.
Yeah. Yep.
Action I'm kind of excited about because I'm curious if it's going to be any good. I haven't been feeling it out lately. Ditto Spider-Man and Detective.
I have Titans coming out, Wonder Woman. I always say Wonder Woman, but it's like always the last book that I read. Fantastic Four is coming out. The conclusion of Die, Die, Die by Image Comics. Let's see what else. There is a whole bunch of crap going out tomorrow, so go pick it up, guys. Support your local comic book store.
There is a bunch of stuff going out. But yeah, like support your local comic book store because they rely on your pulls, your purchases to keep the doors open. So
yeah,
go say hi.
Plus it's cool. Like my comic book store smells amazing.
I'm there twice a week.
Yeah.
Why does it smell amazing? What does it smell like?
Just like it smells so clean, like it's the cleanest thing you've ever smelled. Like, I mean, I know it's just like a spray, but they must have it like all over the thing. So once you can like step outside the door and you can already smell it. It's amazing.
Probably that Myers spray. I love that stuff.
Yeah, I don't know what it is, but I don't want to ever ask and they never change it. So I'm like, oh yeah, this is home.
My LCS smells. My LCS smells good, unless certain people are around. You know, there are a few people that
Sweatpants.
When I walk in there, it's kind of like, oh, that person's here. I don't need to see them. But you know who you are. I wish.
I actually have 2 comic book stores, but I tend to go to the other one more just because they have more. Like the other one kind of is limited on what they order, so I know I can always go there. But not prefer, but I like going to another one because I like the people. I don't know. It's fun to go. I mean, go check it out. I mean, if you're watching this, I'm assuming that you probably go. Anybody.
Well, what?
Huh?
That, I think, is the end of our show. Thank you for watching for as long as you did. I hope you enjoyed the content we brought you this week. Tom King, we don't hate you. So I hope.
If you need a hug, come look me up in Seattle.
Put back on mute.
Need a hug, Tom King? I'll give you a hug.
We really don't. We just are hoping for a few adjustments.
Go read more Batman. And Booster Gold. Read more Booster Gold.
Read more Booster Gold. Read Jeff Johns' run. Read Dan Jurgens' run.
Don't do anything. They're amazing.
He could always be amazinger.
So could you.
Hey,
there burn. All right, so
don't worry, it's not
coming.
Thank you for believing in my potential.
We love you guys. Thank you for watching. And this is Comic Watch signing out.